Okay, let's dive into this explainer. Now, when you think of West Virginia, the mountain state, you probably picture rolling hills, mist-covered forests, and just breathtaking natural beauty, right? But beneath that scenic surface lies a history that simply refuses to stay buried. Today, we're exploring the restless spirits, haunted asylums, and bizarre encounters that make these rugged Appalachian hills literally some of the most haunted places in America. So, here is our spooky campfire anthology roadmap for today. We're going to cover West Virginia's dark history, the infamous Trans-Allegheny Asylum, the Greenbrier Ghost, the Flatwoods Monster, cursed towns, and finally, the echoes in the hills. Let's get into it.
Section 1. West Virginia's Dark History. Beauty versus Horror.
And this brilliantly illustrates the striking duality of the mountain state. On one hand, you have these idyllic, sun-dappled forests, the West Virginia you see on postcards. But right beneath all that lies a totally different, mist-filled reality. These rugged landscapes are completely woven with chilling legends and true ghost stories passed down for generations. Because these deep Appalachian valleys were so physically isolated, old folklore didn't just survive here, it thrived. It perfectly preserved the fears and stories of a much older, darker world. Let's turn to Section 2, the Trans-Allegheny Asylum Echoes from Weston. We're opening our first case file at this massive Kirkbride-style stone structure looming over the quiet town of Weston. Its imposing Gothic architecture is practically shrouded in mist. As you walk its echoing halls today, paranormal investigators and visitors report absolutely incredible sensory experiences. We're talking about disembodied voices whispering down empty corridors, heavy doors just slamming on their own, and shadow figures darting right out of your peripheral vision. Over in the Civil War wing, people literally report seeing the apparitions of long-dead soldiers. Now look at this stark contrast. When the asylum opened its doors back in 1864, it was originally designed to house just 250 patients in a peaceful, moral treatment environment. But fast forward to the 1950s, and the situation completely devolved into severe overcrowding, understaffing, and just profound suffering and neglect.
2,400. Think about that for a second. That is the staggering number of patients crammed into a facility meant for 250. It's absolutely no wonder the pain of the past still echoes so loudly in the present.
That overwhelming sadness is really embodied by the notorious hotspots inside. First, there's Lily, the tragic spirit of a little girl said to have been born and died inside the asylum walls. Guests constantly report hearing her giggle, finding toys mysteriously moved, or even feeling a small, unseen hand grab theirs. But, not all spirits are that innocent. Up on the highly dangerous fourth floor, where the most severe cases were kept, people report violent encounters, getting scratched, pushed, or suddenly overcome by inexplicable nausea and absolute panic. All right, moving to Section 3. The Greenbrier Ghost, the spirit who solved her own murder. So this next eerie chapter unfolds exactly like a true crime documentary, taking us back to 1897 in Greenbrier County. First, a young woman named Zona Heister is found dead. Her husband, Erasmus Shue, claims she had an everlasting faint, and somehow the local doctor actually bought that diagnosis. But Zona's mother, Mary Jane, was not having it. She claimed Zona's spirit appeared at the foot of her bed for 4 consecutive nights, first just as a bright light, then as a vivid apparition, who literally turned her head completely around to reveal a broken neck, telling her mother that Shue had strangled her in a rage. Driven by this horrifying vision, the mother demanded an exhumation, which led directly to a landmark trial. So, the crucial point is, this remains the only ghost story known to have helped convict a murderer. When doctors finally performed the autopsy after the exhumation, they found a completely broken neck and a crushed windpipe with finger-shaped bruises. The physical evidence absolutely validated the ghost's claims. Shue was found guilty by the jury and sent to prison for life. Crazy, right? Section 4. The Flatwoods Monster. Eerie encounter on a lonely hill. Let's set the scene. The date is September 12, 1952 in Braxton County. A group of boys see a bright object streak across the sky and crash on the Fisher farm. So they grab flashlights and head up the hill with local mother Kathleen May and National Guardsman Eugene Lemon. Now, imagine pushing through those dark woods until you hit a thick, oily, burning mist settling over the landscape. A mist that literally burned their eyes and throats. When Lemon shined his flashlight into that thick mist, they reported seeing a terrifying 10-foot-tall entity with a glowing spade-shaped hood. It had these piercing reddish-orange eyes staring right through them, and a dark, metallic body that looked like it was draped in a long, pleated skirt. And the creepiest part? It didn't walk. It seemed to hover or glide right towards them. Now sure, skeptics have spent decades arguing they just misidentified a barn owl perched on a branch, but the witnesses, they never wavered on what lurched out of the dark that night. And we know this wasn't just a trick of the light because there was a very real physical aftermath. The creature let out a sudden hiss, chasing the panicked group down the hillside, running for their lives all the way back to town. For days afterward, the witnesses suffered from intense, unexplained nausea, severe throat irritation, and vomiting. To this day, it remains a chilling pillar of unexplained phenomena in West Virginia. Section 5. Cursed Towns and Folklore, Witches, Spirits, and Mountain Legends. Now we're zooming out to the broader, older folklore of the region. Appalachia is completely dotted with isolated hollers and forgotten mist-covered coal towns. Locals constantly whisper about places where misfortune hangs heavy in the air, settlements basically abandoned after strings of unexplained tragedies. In these remote areas, the very land is said to have been soured by those tragedies, or in some legends, by a dying witch's curse. It shows how when communities are physically cut off by harsh mountains, their fears and folklore become deeply intertwined with the landscape itself. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the incredibly diverse folk magic and entities rooted here. You have spirits like the White Lady, a restless entity wandering the lonely mountain ridges. Then there are beasts like the Snarly Owl, a terrifying shape-shifting creature said to stalk the woods. And of course, deeply rooted practices like granny magic, where everyday mountain healers and hexes were simply a part of life, intimately tied to the unmarked graves along forgotten trails. Finally, Section 6. Echoes in the Hills, Conclusion. So from the tragic, echoing halls of the Trans-Allegheny Asylum, to the vengeful justice of the Greenbrier Ghost, and the unexplainable terror of the Flatwoods Monster, these stories prove that the hills of West Virginia don't just echo history, they hold on to it. It leaves you wondering, on a dark Appalachian hill, are you ever truly alone? Thank you so much for exploring this explainer with me, and I hope it leaves you hungry to uncover even more of the hidden mysteries all around us.